Welcome to the Loud Quiet. Ooh, empty nester. Okay. What does that mean?
Yeah, I think that actually probably is the theme of the empty nest. What are we doing? Let's do this. Let's do this thing. I don't know if I'm recording. Yeah. Okay.
Great. Sans children. Just us. We need a tissue box up here. Follow along on our journey and maybe, we can learn from others.
Yeah. I don't have a clue how to be empty nester.
This is the Loud Quiet Living the Empty Nest.
Hey everyone, welcome back to The Loud Quiet. It is episode 37, and we're inside, and there's a little more smiles than last week. So thanks everybody for being supportive of our grumbly episode last week. Not that life is magically immediately better, but it is amazing how moods can ebb and flow. And so today it's a different conversation than last one, and I know I'm looking forward to talking, and hopefully y'all are looking forward to listening and watching this one.
Yeah, it is. We are inside. We did make it out to church today, but man, we had some bad storms come through during the night. We were, not great sleep from 3:45 on, but luckily no damage or anything.
No, so. It was, I'm going to call it annoying. It was the kind where boom, big thunder, you wake up. And then you had enough time to drift back to sleep, and you could feel yourself totally asleep. Boom! As opposed to the intense 30-minute one. Yeah. But to your point, no damage. Yeah. And we put in sod yesterday. How empty nest is that? Hey, Clancy, we put in grass yesterday.
Yeah. We didn't put in grass, but our lovely lawn man that we love put in our grass yesterday.
We support a capitalist economy and help provide. So, I'm very thankful that there was no damage and we got our sod water.
It really did, and what we're going to get into, I did not get to have a lazy weekend morning this weekend, which for those of you who really know me, sleep is I love sleep. And when I don't get good sleep, it's not so good for anyone.
I was going to say, I wanted to see what your answer was there, because it was going to be, it's not good for Clancy. Well,
no, it's not good for
everybody. Yeah.
But it's been fine. But yeah, we, yesterday, and what our first kind of topic is going to be about, my brother and sister-in-law are here from Germany, and so we were having a meeting with my parents just to go over some things. And, so it was funny talking, just kind of realizing what your role is in the family dynamics of, my family,
absolutely,
your family. You probably have now taken on somewhat of a role in my family's dynamics, just
it's amazing what experience will do and experiences will do to allowing someone to be inserted into a family dynamic.
Especially with the topics that we were discussing. And it's all about, we just wanted to make sure that things were in order, that we knew where things were, if anything.
End of life preparation.
It's just,
End of life preparation, both what happens after, but then also preparing up to end of life. Yeah. And while there's no time frame, none of us know that time frame, it is a relief for everyone to have that conversation finalized when people are able to have that conversation.
Yes, exactly. So again, like we've done,
we are such a broken record.
This is our PSA. And I mean, even this week, you looked at me and said, "Can we talk about something else rather than
the loud, quiet, living the end of life planning?"
Maybe we should put out that book.
I'm going to start a new consulting thing where I don't give legal advice, but you just come to us and we'll help you plan this for your families.
It is interesting, though, because while we still did have our children in the house, our focus was solely on them and on their schedules and on their plans.
Right.
Now that they're gone, like you said, the things in empty nest now have become more focused on our extended family and those kind of things, and because we're, in a couple of situations that we didn't think we would find ourselves in. But
Right.
But yeah, it's, so, and my mom always, it doesn't happen often that we are all three in the same place together,
Three being the three
the three
children
children,
of
which
your.
I'll show the picture in just a second. But, so I know it makes her very happy when we're all there and, ribbing each other and
And you know what?
having a good time.
You don't appreciate that. Not you, Clancy, the general you don't appreciate that until you entered this phase. It's like everything else. You don't appreciate what your parents did for you until you become a parent. Now, I understand why I want my children to be together, why I want to see them, to your point, ribbing each other or enjoying each other. I also understand the flip side of being the child and not necessarily wanting to like spend all of my time with, when my parents were living and all of that. I know what it's like to be the child as well. Now I know what it's like to be the parent wishing that, hey, it's all three are together. How delightful.
Yeah. So here, this is a picture of me and my two brothers, Chad and Casey. Chad is 6 years older than me. Casey is 6 years younger than me. So yes, I am the middle. And, I have taken on, and especially I could really see it yesterday, the role of the middle child, which is usually the peacemaker, sometimes the go-between,
The middle child ends up being the shuttle diplomat, the go-between. That one side will say something and it has to get through, or it shouldn't, but you take that role on.
And I mean, I could even say it, and my dad and Chad would be totally fine with me, talking about this. They were starting to get a little at each other. The voices were starting to go up a little bit. Nothing crazy, but sometimes I'd have to say, okay, look, we can settle that later. We don't need to go. Let's go down this path. Just kind of redirecting. It was also very good to have you there because, like we've talked about, you have a wealth of knowledge, and now me as well, into
making sure you have your crap
Yeah.
together
Yes.
and what happens when you don't, or
Yeah.
when you're,
Yeah.
and not that my family didn't have it together, but being exposed to what all the pain points are.
Having everything together. But then, my dad had his stack yesterday, and it was very well organized. Everything was, we didn't know what we were walking into, but
He was very prepared.
Yes.
And here's something though, for say there's not necessarily empty nesters, and you've got kids. You may feel prepared. You may actually be prepared. If you haven't communicated that to your kids,
Exactly.
they could be in a situation of not knowing where to look for things, where the passwords, all that stuff that's a part of it. It was great for us to walk in, for it to be so well put together that your dad did. And it was great to have that conversation to know. And there were a few gaps that were discovered, but they weren't massively consequential gaps. Just ones that were like, oh, okay, good. Let's go take care of that.
And especially with, just again, power of attorneys, all those kind of things. You realized, oh wait, y'all have one missing,
person.
that needs to be addressed. And so again, that was good that we've already kind of been down that path with.
Here's one I don't know that we've said on the air. Live from the upstairs studio, it's TOQ. Sorry if I blasted anybody's eardrums there.
93,
KTLQ. Lots of train of thought. The one of, and you wouldn't do it until a later stage of life, but having the child be on the parent's bank account.
Yes.
I don't think we've mentioned that one, and that is one that is so important, because the moment that a death happens, the bank cuts it off.
Yeah.
But if the child has access, there's no cutoff because you have access.
And it's not even if a death occurs, it's, my mom had to go on my grandmother's account because, she was starting to go down the path of dementia and was writing like 1 cent checks to so just so you have access if it becomes a time that you need to have access.
That's a great point.
Before
it's not
death,
just post.
it's not just So
and things that aren't thought about is, how do you keep the utilities on? How do you keep the water bill paid, the electrical paid, the cell phone bills? Like all of those sorts of things are why that checking account access actually matters. Because man, when things get locked down, they get locked down, but creditors, the people that the bills are getting paid to, don't care.
Well,
they still want to be paid.
And what's different with our generation versus our parents is that we pretty much have everything tied to a credit card. A lot of our stuff doesn't come directly out of our checking account. Mm-hmm. Whereas they still kind of have a mix of both. Mm-hmm. And so, that is another, you do need to have at least some access to it. But
so now we got ourselves into the topic of advising again.
I know.
Again, if you'd like to talk to us, we bill at $1,000 an hour, and we're happy to consult for you. Just pick that number out of my fanny.
Because, we have had to learn and talk about that a lot for the past, year and a half, 2 years. But it, we had a great time. We celebrated. My side of the family has a plethora of birthdays in March and April. My sister and one of my sister-in-laws and I share the same birthday. Your birthday.
Who would have thought? Like, stop down on that. That your brother married a woman that has your same birthday. That is awesome.
And
your brother-in-law.
Married
your
her,
brother. I said that weird.
Your brother-in-law, but yeah, married her. Later in life. So yes, we both have the same birthday. You have a March birthday. Allison, who's Casey's wife, has an April birthday. My mom has an April birthday. Tegan has an April birthday. So we had a birthday cake for Noom, Chad's, because she didn't get to really celebrate in Germany. And so...
Right? Because even you talked about this. Chad's flight from South Africa got delayed. He wasn't able to be there, that sort of stuff. And so what did you give her? You told her that she can't do this anymore?
Because when I had talked to her on her birthday or shortly after, I said, "Oh, what did y'all do?" And she said, and Chad said, "Oh, well, she cooked me dinner because I missed her cooking." I was like, Noom, we need to have a chat. I was like, yeah, we don't do that.
On your birthday, you don't cook.
No.
And it was Chad's flight delay. Yeah. There was some reasons behind it still. And you were helping her understand the ways.
So, we took several pictures. I didn't put any of those up, but we might put one later, of all four girls, because we all have March, April birthdays. Yeah. And so it was a nice afternoon or morning, afternoon time to get to spend together. They came in for Tanner's graduation, which we'll get to, but, next weekend. So, it's, like we were talking about family dynamics and kind of the roles that you take on as your parents get older. It's roles that you probably already had as a child, but you just didn't really get to see them manifest so much until later in life, I think, for some things.
And I'll say yes, and there's probably some that you didn't feel the authority to take on. Maybe it's part of the personality, like you're talking about the middle child, the stereotypical peacemaker. There's that mental shift, and it's an important's the wrong word, but just one that can be hard to get over, of recognizing, no, wait, I need to no longer be I'm getting the guidance from the generation above. I need to be helping lead them forward. I need to be guiding them forward. And it can still be, even when you know that that's what needs to be done, it can be uncomfortable. Because that's the generation before you, respect your elders, that sort of thing. And so to start to take that role of, no, this is the way it's got to be. This is what needs to happen. And in the case of your parents, there was no conflict there.
No. Yeah.
It can be a difficult place to be. And I don't know that you realize it, going back to the empty nest, until suddenly the kids are out of the house and you realize, oh, I have the space to do this, which then allows you to realize the need, or I guess maybe the space allows you to realize the need, which gives you the time to actually do what needs to be done.
And that's such a good segue into what I want you to talk about, because you losing your father at such a young age, we were 30.
Okay, I'm not going to do the math quickly enough, but
I mean, Tanner had just turned 1 in June, And
Yeah,
so
30.
yeah.
Like you may have been 29, I may have been somewhere in that.
Yeah. And what you just said about having the time and space, we had a 1-year-old and you had to take on some roles that you weren't necessarily prepared or ready or had the time to do.
And no one is prepared
No.
for an unexpected, sudden
Yeah.
passing of a family member.
No, at 57. Yeah.
Right. And I got to tell you, I don't even remember exactly. I don't know how much I actually did or didn't do. Certainly during the funeral stage, I remember elements of talking to the paper about an obituary they wanted to do. Yada. There were things. It's just such a blur. And I think it's that element of it's such a blur that I don't know that I remember doing that much. I clearly had to. My mom had to step up. But getting introduced to that part of caring for a parent when you are still so deeply enmeshed in kind of the raising your own kid's face, 1-year-old, soon to be another one on the way a few years later. I don't know that I necessarily achieved that role as well as I have sort of stepped into it now that we're in that empty nest stage.
Well, let me talk about it from my perspective
Remind me.
because I do. I mean, there were multiple, and this was before texting was really a thing. There were multiple phone calls of tech support.
Oh,
You had
tech
to get.
support.
You had to
Absolutely.
be able to. Thank goodness that the technology was where you could see your mom's computer
Not initially.
on our
It
computer.
was awful until we
but- yes.
could.
But so there.
That's right. Tech support was massive.
Yeah,
I kind of diminished that.
Yeah.
Because I don't think of that as the same deep relationship. But my mom couldn't do a whole lot of things.
Yeah. I mean, and your mom could do a lot of things, but the computer technology, that's, I remember a lot of that.
You're right.
And just,
That's why, we joked about that. One of the best things that happened when Rachel and Steven, my sister and her brother, moved to Austin from San Francisco, is I said, I have resigned from tech support. It is all the Browns at that point. And I did. I resigned.
I think at that point, though, she had pretty much gotten the hang of it.
True,
but, yes.
but I was out, and it was
Yeah.
a key point of that.
But
You're right.
there were things that you took on the role of you walked your sister down the aisle, which made my role at the wedding
You had a really
not
hard.
as much fun. But
Well, let's explain why. It wasn't just, oh my gosh, my husband's walking his sister down the aisle. You had a how many week old?
yeah, Tegan was 2.5 weeks old,
Uh-huh.
3 weeks old,
Yeah.
and Tanner was almost 3. Thank goodness my parents came down. But yeah, you were involved in all the wedding party stuff, and I was
And I've said this.
driving to Chick-fil-A to get trays for the kids that didn't even eat, and yeah, it was.
And I've said this. I don't think I managed that well. I also think that I don't know that there's a playbook on how to manage it well.
No.
In retrospect, I know what could have been done differently.
Yeah.
You were definitely thrust into a role, and I think that's why the natural order of things is. It's easier to be thrust into this role when you're an empty nester. Like
yeah.
some of what we're doing now is
Yeah.
just part of the natural course of things. And carry.
Yeah, I don't have a 3-week-old. I'm trying to be up in some room breastfeeding and doing in my wedding.
Yeah, I was going to say,
attire.
not a lot of wedding attire has
Yeah.
the breastfeeding flap.
Well, at that point,
Huh.
I think I was still At that point, I was still wearing probably a maternity thing because
Probably.
it was 3 weeks. But yeah,
There's
not-
a new line. So we'll be counselors, and we're going to design maternity wear for
I have
weddings.
no idea no desire to go back into that realm. So
Talking about it now, though, adopting the role, and it's been a unique challenge because, and I will start this by saying that I am going in assuming positive intent because we have seen positive intent. We truly believe that the parties involved in my family right now, and I'm speaking specifically Jerry, Rachel, and me, of kind of my immediate family, everyone's looking at it, trying to find the best interests for the family. Mm-hmm. There are some upcoming major decisions, though, with the childhood home that I grew up in that I have no legal authority over whatsoever, but there's emotional and influential elements to it. And trying to navigate that in a case where it's not necessarily even my dad, but it's a man who married my mom, who is a wonderful guy to my mom, and going those kind of role changes where you're trying to assume a position of influence or leadership, or even to use the word authority is a little too strong, but something like that, in a case where it's perhaps even more awkward that it's not technically your dad, but it's this wonderful guy and that's all there. So working on that aspect of this shift, really trying to, because these are important parts of my family, the property itself. Like, some of it sounds callous, but these are conversations that have to be had, and they're challenging.
And I think I think, and you have always displayed this character trait. You are very good at mediating, and it's, I'm not trying to use that word as it's not like you've had to mediate between things going on, but one thing gets said and another person hears it another way, and then you have been able to come in and kind of be like the bridge between, okay, I think this is really what was being the intent behind what was being said and how it was received. And so you have definitely taken on that mediation role. And even you are very good at, and this is just your business, way back from like process days, that you are very good at boom, boom, boom. Let me put it in an email. These are the things, very clear cut, very, non-emotional. And, you have had to do that even with, Nana's stuff too. And so
I think well, thank you for that. Actually, that's a kind compliment to hear. There's a lot of truth to how business can help inform this. And I've learned, like, starting with what's the shared objective. Like, even when I was talking about that kind of in a rambly way, sorry, listeners and viewers, but that rambly way of kind of what's going on in that side of it, saying that we're starting all from positive intent. I think that's an important thing to understand. And if it's not there, then it needs to be called out. We all have differing objectives, and we've got to find these objectives. But starting by, these are the agreed upon objectives. We all think this is what we want to do. Now, here's what I'm hearing. I love these phrases. I'm hearing you say this, this, this. And I'm hearing you say this, this, this. Have I heard you both correctly?
Yeah. That goes back to marriage counseling.
It's such a counseling and therapist
so
kind of way.
Hearing.
And I've used that phrase, starting though with the objectives. Do we all agree that these are objective? And usually they're ones that, it's kind of America and apple pie, that we all agree X. Well, okay, unless you think that the sky is not blue, it's really hard not to agree. You set these sort of things.
Yeah.
Anyway, I could go on a completely different tangent about that, but you're right, that trying to help this stage of life and these conversations can be so explosive.
Yeah.
It can destroy families. And I don't want that. And I can assure you, no one actually wants that. And so finding a way to navigate through what should be innocuous conversations that could end up being worse, it's important there.
And that's one thing. What you just said was what I was going to say, is that luckily, and thank God that, so far, our families, both sides, are on, there's no like, nothing has been, there's no severs in any relationship. There's no, anger, resentment. Like even yesterday when we were talking about a few things, Chad and I just kind of looked at each other and were like, none of the three of us are going to fight over who gets the sideboard, who gets the, and my mom has laid it out in the will that they did years ago. This person gets this because we kind of told her what we wanted. And I'm going through that list. It's like, yeah, I don't want that anymore. So I don't think it's
Do
going
you
to
have
be.
any whiteout available?
Yeah, I don't think it's going to be an issue. And so,
Well, this is not a thread we have the time to talk about, but I think one thing that sort of helps our generation in that case is, in most cases, for the socioeconomic class that we are and our families are, the objects that are available aren't really what we're all interested in. The objects are not the thing that matters, the memories. And I think there may have been generations past where objects mattered, or there were certain things that were functional or elements like that. It's the case on the Denton side and the Esch side that I think a lot of folks are like, I don't want that.
Yeah.
I don't get that out of my house. So there's something about our generation that cares a little less about stuff.
well, and yes, because I think the generation above us, antiques were a huge thing back then.
Yeah.
And, and times have changed. And even, I was talking to someone this week earlier, that mentioned the consignment stores are even closing.
Yeah.
And because people just don't want
Right.
that stuff, unless, there's things that my mom has that have sentimental value to, my brothers. And there are things that they want, it's so funny. I'm always like, do not bring anything home. Do not. Well, my dad pulled me into his office yesterday and he was like, hey, I found this. Do you want it? And I was actually like, oh my gosh. And it's this just little rectangle thing of coins that are in this little case. And I was like, yeah, I said, I remember playing with this and holding it, and I didn't even realize, I don't think at the time, he was like, well, that's your birth year. Your grandfather did this for your, and I was like, yeah, actually, I do want that. I don't know what I'm going to do with it, but it had, that's the first thing I think in their house. And I'm like, or anyone's that I'm like,
Oh, wait,
yeah, I actually want that. So,
and it has almost no monetary value whatsoever. And I think that's going to be the stuff that we might want to care about will have an emotional tie.
Yeah.
But there's not going to be a lot of fighting over, oh, I want that piece or that piece. Cause
And, I do want to mention, our siblings, younger ones, still have children, and children that are, middle school and below. And so, sometimes we don't want to burden them with some of these discussions because they have other things going on, just like we did when we had kids that age, and the kids certainly don't want to be around for these discussions.
Really?
So, yeah, I just, wanted to throw that in there, that I get that, there's times that, and no decisions were being made on anything. It was just,
to your point about roles.
Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. And adopting different roles. And now decisions wouldn't be made in the absence of family. This was organization.
Yes. This was just making sure everyone knew where the stuff is. Because, in
old people like to hide stuff.
Yeah. And it'll, being the daughter that lives here, a lot of it will fall on me. But anyway.
There's a tip.
Yeah.
Empty nesters, go talk to your parents right now. Yeah. Which bags of trash did you actually hide money in? Yeah. Which book did you put a savings bond in?
Yeah.
Which mattress has the pearls under? I'm not talking about your family, but in
my
general.
Dad was like, we don't have no.
He's
like, you're not going to find anything in this house anywhere. So, yeah. But yeah. So yeah, it was it just ended up, it was a great discussion, good day, spending time with Noom and Chad that we haven't seen, we haven't seen Noom in a long time. So that was nice.
I really enjoyed that.
And, and of course we were all talking about graduations. My younger brother is actually graduating from Texas Tech with his degree. And so his graduation ceremony is the weekend after Tanner's. My parents and Chad and Noom will be there. We will not, because we will still be in Arizona. But yeah, so we're,
graduation season.
Graduation's coming up.
And we're not going to talk a lot about it because we're going next week.
Yeah.
So this episode will drop on Thursday. We will be on a plane
Saturday.
in the past after that, very, very recent near past.
Sorry, no, we'll be here. You have to listen a long way through this podcast to find out when we're going to be gone. So, have had it.
I have really, really armed neighbors, and that's not a joke. So don't mess with our house. But yeah, so we are entering graduation season.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that after it happens. And we may not even have an episode next week. We don't even know what that looks like.
Yeah.
But we're entering that season, and the tears are starting to flow. Why is that?
Well, okay, yeah. Tanner did his graduation photos
if you're listening
this week. Yes,
these are real.
We put up a few, and when he sent them to us. So here, I do like that Arizona does the big year.
2024,
it's the 2024 big sign that they can go and take their pictures in front of, and then, of course, the Palm Walk, which is the.
It is the classic.
Yeah.
There's a sidewalk. There are palms that line it. I really want you, if you're watching, just go pivot over to YouTube and have a look. This is so beautiful.
I mean, I actually
amazing to
showed
see.
it to someone at church this morning, and she said, "Oh, is that real? Like, it almost looks green screen. Like he's in front of a green screen."
Yeah.
But no, that Palm Walk is real and beautiful. I mean, they have one of the best. And then here's here's the side by side of.
It was a side-by-side. The first picture was taken when Tanner was on his college tour. We were there his senior year of high school. So there's the Palm Walk before when we were on the tour going, oh my gosh, look at those people. They're so old looking. Yeah, he's the look at that person that's so old looking taking his graduation pictures.
But yeah, so they do have, I mean, all of his pictures were awesome. The campus is just the best backdrop for pictures.
He looks like, you know what? That doesn't look like a picture that was taken in 2020. It looks like a picture that was taken in 1970. His hairstyle, it's kind of faded somehow,
Okay. I don't, but look at but what's interesting is look at the palms, like how they must have come through and thinned them all out or something, because they're much heavier on the side of, but yeah, so that's,
so we'll talk more about
fun.
that. But
and
we're entering the season.
I actually sent this side by side that I had created to them, and I said, "Oh, someone had a glow up." And for those of you that you were like, "Is that a term?" And I told you, yeah, it's just called. I've seen it on Housewives. I've seen it on other things. But what's so funny is that there was actually a TikTok that someone of a podcast. And they were specifically talking about the ASU glow up. They're like, what happens to these kids when they go to
really?
ASU? Yes.
Interesting.
I'm sure they were more specifically talking about girls, but they said, and yeah, that was the title, the ASU glow up. I was like, oh, how funny. So we're super excited. I mean, and I was getting teary when I saw these pictures. I mean, these 4 years have just flown by for us. And I put that in, for us. It may not have for him, but man, for us, it went by so fast.
I'm a little bit of double mind on that one. There's elements that seem quick, and there's elements that and I think it's because we've enjoyed it so thoroughly that and maybe that's the thing that I would share here is don't let it fly by, and we didn't. Not in a helicopter way, but we were out there. We were enjoying his company, but then also enjoying hearing about it. And just, there's a lot of great memories that we have in this, and those memories help fill the cup to where it doesn't seem as quick as it might. Yet, when I look at that picture, I think, wait, that was Valentine's Day 2020. That was what?
I know. And that's what I think. We have had so much fun on his campus with his friends.
Did we go to college?
Yeah, in Tempe and Phoenix. And it has been nice for us that he has had a great experience. Sure. There was never, I mean, I can't think of any,
There's a couple, like, highs and lows, but no overly, there's...
Yes.
The one that's comical is when they got COVID in the dorm their freshman year, and the food service was right. So there's some.
These are the 2020 kids, so they were already doing class in their dorm room. He didn't even step foot in a classroom until second semester.
Right.
So, that everyone is posting these kids want to do everything for graduation because some of them, thank goodness we did, but some of them didn't even get to have a graduation ceremony. So,
and they will be doing things talking about what we're.
That's what. Yeah, no.
What's the text?
No, I didn't do that one.
Well, we're going to be doing a bar crawl on Saturday.
Yes, don't call it a pub crawl because Tanner laughed at me yesterday for calling it a pub crawl. I said, okay, that's what we called it. So,
but we will be participating with the seniors if our flight gets there on time. We'll be kind of late, but whatever. So you hear this
bar
on Thursday.
Crawl.
We'll be doing a bar crawl.
We have so many fun things,
but we got to talk about it later.
I know we will, but it's going to be a fun week. We did get a little people who I'm sure have been paying attention to the news have seen that some colleges have started canceling classes. They've started canceling graduations. And I mean, and the protesters showed up on Tanner's campus, and the flurry of responses on Facebook from moms saying, if you try to cancel our graduation, because again, these are the COVID kids, I'll do my own protest.
I want to be very clear here. This has nothing to do with the issue at hand. It could be a protest to say we need people to love puppies.
Yeah.
Don't mess with my graduation.
No. So
I don't care what your cause is. Don't mess with my graduation.
Yeah.
All right.
So that's our, but then when we were all like, oh my gosh, there could be a threat to them canceling graduate, and Tanner did say, he said, the president of his college, he said, there's no way he'll cancel graduation. So we're just, it's going to be fun. It's going to be so much fun. And he is so excited. Every time we talk to him, I just can't wait. He's like so looking forward to next week.
As evidenced by the text of the week. Mm-hmm. So he sent this to us, and it's in Tanner, Japan presentation done and dusted. Only a few more major things left.
Yep, and we both responded getting closer and
end
in sight. Yeah, I did like his, so in his Japanese part of the final is they have to do an oral presentation, and he did his on nightlife in Japan. And because he was there, he experienced it. He said, man, my professor, I could see her light up because everyone else's had been boring and educational, and mine was about fun. So in true Tanner fashion, but yeah. And
it's important.
He, he's already said, I had to send him the schedule of everything that we have scheduled. And then he's added in a few things that his friends want. He said, no, they want the Dentons to come. Y'all have to come to these things. So
looking forward to Casey Moore's.
Yeah. So it's just going to be a fun.
Yeah. And that is, so to close this out, those that are listening to this kind of real time, we don't know if we're going to have an episode the week of graduation. If we do, it might be some snackables from the time that we're out there. It may not. We don't know. And so if it's a break, just hang with it, just enjoy, and then we'll be back certainly the following Thursday to talk all about graduation.
Yeah. And, in the midst of the graduations, we also have a daughter that we have to move out of her dorm, so we'll be doing that as well. And
that may be part of the snack. Well, that'd be too late, but you may see some road trip video again as we drive to and from Tucson and Tempe.
So, but it's gonna be fun. I'm really looking forward to it.
Rules and graduation, good times.
All right, there you go. It's been another episode of The Loud Quiet,
Living the Empty Nest.